Hi everyone and welcome to Isamu Rat Care. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to make up a nice healthy balanced but soakable mix. And the reason you might want to do this is you might have rats that are struggling to kind of eat normal food fast enough. It might be a physical speed thing, so they need things softer. They might have had damaged teeth. In some cases you can have rats with malocclusions who have to have their teeth removed, so they have to have a diet that they can eat without gnawing. So it's worth bearing in mind actually, rats have kind of two sets of teeth. They have the front incisors, which everybody knows and sees and are very obvious on a rat, and they have kind of molars at the back which you can't see because they're behind the little floppy bits of skin that protects them from getting all the stuff they gnaw down their throat. So they're still able to chew to a degree when they have their front molars removed, but they can't gnaw in the same way. They can't break into things, so they need a soft diet, a diet that can be soaked, so it's soft and easy for them to chew. So the main principles in terms of a soft diet is to again try and keep it balanced. If a rat's on it for any length of time, then you need to make sure that they're getting full nutrition from it. You don't want to be giving them a load of rubbish either. Short term you can feed them on, let's say, cook some rice, chuck an egg in it, microwave it, maybe mix a bit of veg in it, that kind of thing, and that's absolutely fine. But once you get to this being a long-term thing, then you might want to consider making a soakable mix or something that's much more balanced for that kind of long-term health. The other reason that you might want to make one is, it's going to lead on to a video that I'm going to film straight after this, which is I make a kind of calorie dense soakable meal for my oldies, and it's based off a healthy balanced soakable mix like this, or actually you can buy a couple very good variants from Rat Rations. I think they've done a kind of oldie one, and they've done a kind of adult one and a mum and babies one, which works on a similar principle to this, but it's ready-made. They're also a lot smoother than mine, and my rats tend to prefer something to chew on. So actually when I get the Rat Rations mixes, I add in some of this kind of ingredients to bulk them up. But I thought it'd be useful to show you how to make your own in case Rat Rations isn't an option for you, or if you just want to fancy a go yourself, because it can be quite expensive if you have to buy a lot from their kind of a long-term diet. So it's something that's very straightforward. So what we're going to do for this is I'm just going to follow the kind of standard Shunammite, but the principle behind this is I'm picking ingredients that will soak. So that is basically all there is to it. So you just need to think about it, and whilst I'll show you what ingredients I use, there's nothing to say that you can't think a little bit around it and use some different ingredients that are soakable but still fit into the Shunammite categories or in Shunammite proportions. So if we think back to a Shunammite mix, and this is going to be what I'd call a straight spaced one, just because it's slightly easier, though there are actually variations on that. So a Shunammite mix has base mix about 50%, you can flex that 55, 60%, and that makes up the bulk of the mix, and that in a normal mix should be a mixture of kind of minimally processed grains. Ideally you want lots of things like rice and barley and not very many things like wheat and oats. So that's what I'm kind of focusing on here. So what I've got for this is this is all off Amazon, I should say. Well, apart from the dried veg, which I dried myself on the dehydrator video actually, but it's all stuff that you can easily get off Amazon. Actually, you could probably find a lot of this in local health food shops and supermarkets. I'm just lazy. Actually no, that was from the supermarket because I can't bring myself to buy breakfast cereals off Amazon, but it's that kind of thing that you can get hold of very easily. So what I've got here is I've got 3 main grains, and these are all very useful. And I'm going to, much like Shunammite, it's mixed by volume, so that means a scoop, so I'm going to call this my scoop. My mix is going to be 10 scoops, and we shall see how much that makes. Hopefully it will fit into this, otherwise I'll be running off and finding a bigger box soon. So I need to make 5 of my base mix. So I already know rice here, which this is flake rice. This is the type of stuff you'd find from an Indian supermarket. Some supermarkets stock them in the world food section. It looks like little bits of paper actually, but it's great, it soaks really well. So I'm going to add 2 scoops of that, and then I'm going to add 2 scoops of the barley. So this is flaked barley. I think it's sold for brewery supplies, it seems. I didn't know that. You can get barley that has slightly less of a husk on it that's also flaked, sold for soups and such. So that's great. And then my third main ingredient in this is going to be flaked maize. Again, this apparently is sold for making brewery stuff. I found it on Amazon, and it's actually really quite nice and fine. And it's all been nicely dried, fit for human consumption, so it'd be great for the rats. Right, so So 2 of rice, 2 of barley, quite a big one of maize apparently. So that gives us the base. Nice and simple. All of those ingredients should soak down perfectly well in cold water or even faster in hot water. So what comes next? So in a typical student diet, the next thing you would look at is the protein element, which is 10%. So for that, I have picked egg food. I should say 5 to 10%. I'm picking 10% just for simplicity here. Plus I know egg food is not particularly high in protein, but it's still quite a good side. So I've got all looks like parrot egg food here. I quite like it because it's got bits of dried shrimp and insects and fruit in it. But there are plenty of other brands. Insectivorous Feast, which is really hard to pronounce, but that's really nice as well. Rat Rations do a couple different makes. I quite like, they do a moist one, but that's quite, I think it's got citrus oil in it, so you have to watch that with boys. This is good for all kind of sexes. I just picked one that I could find easily on Amazon for the purposes of this. So with that, 1 scoop equals 10%, so I'm going to put in a scoop of egg food. The handy thing with egg food, and I'll just show you what it is because it's hard to see from the tub. So it's basically, I think they class it as bakery products that have been soaked in egg. There's probably a little bit of sugar in there, which means I do like it. But it does mean that I don't want to add too much or add it all the time to them, but it's a nice kind of way of adding protein to this that soaks very well. There's also a few little kind of raisins and such. Whilst that won't strictly soak, they'll probably quite enjoy it anyway and find a way to eat it because they are quite tasty. So put that in. Right, so next we've got the processed grains. So these are like the breakfast cereals. And you know what? Breakfast cereals are designed to soak down in milk, so you can just use what you'd use in your normal mix. I would just use the breakfast cereals here. In my normal mix I'll put in things like barley rings and such, and whilst they do eventually soak down, it takes a good long time. So I'm just going to put in, it's 25%, so 2.5 scoops. And if you've not seen me make this up before, I make it up in my simple mix. Then it's a mixture of Rice Krispies, bite-sized shredded wheat, the own brand because it's cheap, and value cornflakes. They're all aimed at low sugar cereals that are about 5% sugar or less. And then I've got a few puffed grains like popcorn and such. In fact, Rat Rations do a really nice mix, which is what I've got in there. So that's 2.5 of those. And what I will do is break these up a bit. I don't in my normal mix, but they will take a long time to soak if they're not kind of scrunched up a bit. And there isn't very many of them, so it won't take me long. Right, so that's my processed grains in. So the next bit that you would add is dried vegetables. Now this is, you don't necessarily need to put this in there. I'm going to put a few in, but I'm not going to measure out like absolutely loads because they don't soak down that well. They just come a little bit kind of soggy and slimy. But it's nice for them to have a little bit in there. So I'm going to put one of those in. And I'm trying to scrunch it up a little bit, so break it up a little bit more. You can get some nice, quite fine chopped herbs and such. It's good for flavour, and it adds vitamins and such. But any dried veg should kind of reconstitute. Just try and make sure there's the smallish bits. So I'll kind of smush that up a little bit more. And probably actually when I'm serving it, I'll be breaking bits of it up. So that's just from my dehydrated one. I think it's dried kale, dried spring greens. I think there might be a bit of parsnip, carrot. There was a stir-fry mix in there, so I think that's dried red cabbage. So it's a bit of a mixture, but kind of any decent dried vegetable mix will work. So the final bit of a Tunamite style mix is seeds. So what's great for seeds is milled seeds. So this will kind of mix up really well. If you're struggling to get hold of milled seeds and can't be bothered milling them yourself, because you can just use it in a blender, though it is quite hard on your blender, so it does wear it out fast. You can just leave that out and then add a bit of oil when you make it up. In fact, I quite often add a bit of oil anyway. But I'm using milled omega seeds because they're very, very similar to what I use in my main mix. So there's a mixture of like linseed, pumpkins, there's even dried goji berry in this one, which has been good for them. And that just will help kind of add oil to the diet, and you only add 5% of that, so that is half a scoop. Which is about what's left in my milled seeds. So, there we go. So there we have it. A very nice smelling soakable mix. So I'm just going to stop the video for now, add a little bit of water and show you what it turns out like. So I've added a little bit of water now and it's mushing down nicely. You can see that there's still quite a bit of structure to this. It's not a very smooth, soft diet. Well, it's a soft diet, but it's not like very sloppy or porridgey. That's because my rats don't prefer that. They don't actually like something that they don't get to chew. But what you could do, if your rat needed more sloppy than this, then you could stick the mix in a blender a little bit and chop it down a little bit finer. You don't have to get to really smooth, but again, if you really needed to, you could. But this is basically a balanced diet. The only thing you need to take into account is this is a straight space diet, so you do need to add supplements regularly. But given you're giving a wet food, it's really easy to add supplements. You just mix it in, either by using something like Dr. Squiggles and Daily Essentials and Calcivet or Daily Rat 3, or another of the kind of vitamins that are tackling vitamin D, calcium and copper. You just want to add that a couple of times, 2 to 4 times a week, I would say, just to make sure they're getting it. But you can see the longer it goes, the more kind of mushy it kind of turns into. So it actually smells quite nice, though I'm probably not going to start eating it. But yeah, it's kind of mushing down really well now, and you can speed that up by using hot water. I just used cold water because I don't have a hot tap in the rat room and I can't bother boiling the kettle. But yes, it's entirely up to you. The other thing to say about this is you can make it different flavours if you need to. So you can just add a bit of baby food rather than making it up with water, like a sloppy baby food, and that will give it a particular flavour. If you're struggling to persuade a rat to eat, that can be very useful. So yes, that is how to make a soft diet. So hopefully, should you need it, you now have options.